people who have a hard time, during the Christmas season, their suffering, I think, or their difficulty in life is highlighted because of it's so opposite to the Christmas season. And I think that Mary's a good character to look at because she had plenty of that in and of her own story that was related to Jesus coming. And I wondered if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, so you have to imagine yourself in a culture 2,000 years ago. She would have been of marriageable age because we know she's engaged, which means she's in her teens, mid to late teens. And, small town life. She's going to get engaged to a guy who's an ancestor of one of the great kings of Israel. That's awesome. She's marrying into like a big name family.
So she has a lot of good things happening.
Yes, good things happening in small town. I'm just trying to paint the scene. Like life could be awesome. And then all of a sudden it takes a really different turn. She has a nighttime encounter with a divine being. That's crazy. And she's told that she is going to be pregnant. She's never had sex with anybody, and she's going to be pregnant, and she's going to give birth to the Son of God. And she's told that her life is going to get very complicated really quickly.
Yeah. I've always been like shocked by like her handling all of that at such a young age. Like I'm 30. Remarkable. I don't think I could handle news that your life's about to get really hard and really insane, but it's also kind of like a blessing. That's like the hard thing.
Well, I mean, just if you put yourself in, a 15, 16-year-old girl's mind in that kind of setting to get this kind of news, first of all, you're not married. So instantly, you've got a problem. You're small town, and it's not just like your reputation's going to go down the drain as you your pregnancy starts to show. But your husband has like legal grounds to break off your fiance has legal grounds to break off the engagement. I mean, that's and yet her response is total humility and acceptance. She's just like, whatever you're going to do, Lord, I'm down to do it.
Can I ask, what do you think it took for her to be able to respond like that? That's always been the weirdest response to me. I think I would have been like, no thanks, very kind of you. Can you pick somebody else? And that's not how she responds.
Man, what's cool is in the Gospel of Luke, where her portrait is really developed, he's actually told you the story of one other person right in front of Mary's, and it's like a priestly Jerusalem figure, an old man. And he also receives a divine message that he and his wife are going to have a child, and he doesn't believe it. He actually lacks faith. That. And then he can't talk for Zechariah. He can't talk for a while. And so Luke just told you a story about a religious leader who got the same kind of announcement, and he didn't believe it. Then he puts a teenage girl in front of you who gets the same message, actually even a more intense message. And she's just like, I'm freaked out, but I'm totally down. And so the contrast couldn't be better. This is what the whole Gospel of Luke is trying to do. Is Luke loves to show you that it's actually the people in low social positions, people who aren't important, people who know that they have great need for God's grace and mercy. He wants to highlight these as the exalted ones, as the people who are most important in God's economy. And it's going to go on like Zacchaeus, the famous, he only appears in the Gospel of Luke, all these poor hurting people that get elevated in Jesus' kingdom. And Mary's the first one. She's the first one among these people of kind of low status who show great faith. And it's a really cool theme in the Gospel of Luke, and it all begins with Mary. So let's talk about how they go through with the pregnancy, and they get married. Joseph stays committed. He's also gets a visitation from a divine being telling him to not break off the engagement. Then they get the Roman news report is we're going to raise taxes. So everybody's got to go register down at your hometown. So now you have a very pregnant young woman who's got to travel, 100 miles. Which whether it's by donkey or foot or both,
that's super difficult.
So she's got to do that. She ends up giving birth away from her family while she's there.
And away from your like home. That'd be like a woman flying somewhere now and like giving birth on the plane or in a, strange hospital. Even that would be better than what Mary had.
Totally. So even though Joseph likely has family in Bethlehem, it's not your mom, and then it just gets even worse. It gets even worse from then because then all of a sudden you've at least been given a clue about the identity of your child. Then you hear news that the king over your land, who you already hate, he's a murderer and a cheat. You actually hear that he's issued a death sentence on your son, and you have to flee. So you flee into the night, going into the desert. And you hear a report that you barely escaped, and all of the infant boys in that town have been executed because of your son.
There'd be a lot of fear, a lot of like shame that comes with that.
Yes. I mean, you wonder if you're being followed, right? But also knowing that like there's all these other families that just got deprived of their son because of this surprise. This is so traumatic.
Yeah.
Then you live in exile, as a refugee in Northern Africa for at least a few years.
Insane.
You come back and you can't settle where you want to in Bethlehem. You have to go back to your small hill country town of Nazareth.
You've been gone for so long.
Totally. You've been gone for a couple years, a few years, and you go back and you have to live there now. And everybody's wondering what's the story. So if this happened to a friend of yours, they would be in counseling. You know what I'm saying? They would.
For sure.
What a remarkable story of somebody's faithfulness amidst such incredible trauma.
Don't you find it so interesting that God was like providing the savior of the world through Mary, and yet this beautiful, waited for, promised moment that people didn't know what it was going to look like, that it came through such trauma, like you just talked about, so much difficulty. And I think as a Christian, like I just really struggle sometimes that God can bring a blessing through a road of trial and difficulty. I think it's hard to hold those things together in our hands. So how do you think that the story of Mary shows us that and explains that for people who are really struggling and during the Christmas season are like, God, where are you in this?
It's truly terrifying to feel like if you believe God exists, he certainly has removed himself from my life. Because why else would this kind of thing be happening? And it's true. What the story is trying to tell us is that that was a moment in history where God was most present. In fact, he became physically present through Mary's birth canal into the world. And so that's a remarkable thing to claim and to believe that it's actually in our greatest suffering, God's felt absence may be the circumstance for his most personal presence in our own stories. And no one else can recommend that to another person. You can't just tell your friend like, hey, chin up, God's with you.
Yeah.
That's something each of us has to discover on our own. And that's something Mary had to discover on her own. But that is, I think, the power of her suffering and her story is that it was God physically present in her life through such terrible trauma. It's very, very powerful. So there you go. There's so much to ponder. I think because of the way church history has gone, some traditions of Christianity love Mary, and really like to draw attention to her. And some other traditions kind of want to minimize her, maybe as a reaction. And we just need to honor her. What a remarkable woman and what a remarkable story. And her story is worth us pondering and keeping in our hearts too.
Special thanks to Tim and the Bible Project for partnering with us to make Humans of Bethlehem. They make incredible videos that clearly show how the Bible is a unified story that leads to Jesus. Definitely check out their channel and videos using the links below. You can watch the full Humans of Bethlehem series right over here, or you can subscribe to Way Nation for more hilarious and meaningful videos right over here.